Hi. I understand I haven't been making videos for a very long time, basically since the beginning of the summer, and that's just because I haven't really had time to just sit down and make any videos. So instead of doing single reviews for all the books I've read this summer, I'm just going to do a wrap up. It's just going to make it so much easier, so much quicker, because there's quite a lot of reviews I'm behind on now, and it will get too much. I'm just going to do it all in one go, basically. So I'm just going to do them in order. I read them. I'll be quite brief. I've done Goodreads reviews for every single one of these. People really care about what I think in detail. That's fine. I'll link all of them below. But let's go through them. Some of them I just haven't read in quite a while now, because my summer for me, even though it's now September, summer wrap up will be from me from June to basically today. Because I'm going back to uni in a couple of days' time, so really my summer is now over. But before that, I would have considered them anything I've read over the summer. So let's go through these. First book I read this summer was The Clash of Kings, and second book in the Game of Thrones series by R.Martin. I really enjoyed it. I really do enjoy these books. I basically obsessed with the TV show. I became obsessed about 2 years ago now, when my flatmate from Halls introduced it to me. I must have rewatched it about 3 times now. I can't wait for the next series, and I kind of really do want to get around to reading all of the books, but they're a bit of a hefty challenge, so I'm trying to set myself the challenge of doing at least one a year. I read the first one last year, so I've read this one this year, and hopefully I'll carry on going like that, because it's a lot of reading time to commit. It takes me about 3 weeks to read one of these books, purely just because I have to do other stuff at the same time. I can't just devote a period of time to reading anymore, so it takes me longer than they used to be able to read them. Also, they're quite hefty and quite complicated. They're very in-depth. You've really got to sort of pay attention. It's not a quick or easy read, but despite that, I do really enjoy them. I got into this book really quickly. It was really nice to start reading some stuff that was different to the TV series, because the first book was basically a carbon copy of the first series. This has some more development and a few plot changes, and I really enjoyed that. I love the way R.Martin writes. He's so descriptive and in-depth, and he makes these really complicated and intriguing worlds and characters and plots, and I just absolutely love the series. I can't sing its praise high enough, and I think if you haven't read them, you really should. They're really worth reading, and they're worth investing in, despite the fact that they take a very large portion of your reading time, which is not helping with my Goodreads reading challenge, which I am ages behind on. I haven't book smart this year, the books I've been reading, but I'm still really glad I've read this book. So that's the first book I read this summer. Then I read The Girl on the Train, which was last year's summer read. Everyone was talking about it last summer, and then quite a few people started talking about this year, and I finally got around to reading it. This isn't my copy. I lent my copy to someone. This is my sister's copy, but I just thought I'd do it so you can see the cover. It's a really good book. I really enjoyed it. However, my only criticism is it wasn't thriller enough for me. I guessed, I would say, the 3 main plot twists within the first 3 chapters. I kind of knew exactly where the book was going, so nothing was that surprising to me. But I really wanted to get around to reading this before the film came out, because I'm just really excited about the film. But it's just not, it wasn't enough of a thriller to me. I still really enjoyed it, as I said, and I got through it really quickly. Within, I think it took me a day to read this book. It took no time at all. And I did really enjoy reading it. It just wasn't as gripping or suspenseful as I wanted it to be. I think I was expecting it to be on the same sort of lines as The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series, the Millennium trilogy, which are possibly my favourite books of all time, and it just wasn't. It kind of let me down. I found it quite predictable, and there wasn't really any likeable characters. However, this aside, it's still a good book. I can still see why a lot of people chose it. This is like last year's summer read. I can fully understand, because it is fantastic. Everyone is I can understand why you get gripped by it really quickly. You do, and you do read it all in a really short period of time, but it's just not as exciting as it could be. I think because I've read so many thriller books now, it's very hard for me to find a thriller that is surprising to me, is the word I wanted. And so it takes a lot more to impress me on the thriller scene. I think that's the problem. But if you don't read a lot of thriller books, like I know a lot of other people didn't guess the ending and things, not trying to say that I'm like really smart and I got it. Most of the time I'm not that great. I think because I've seen so many now and read so many now, I kind of know the formulas. I know what to predict. So I knew what was coming. But it's still a good book, is basically the summary. I still think you should definitely read it. It's a great holiday read because you can just sit and flick through it and it's not that intense. It was a nice change after reading Game of Thrones. It was a lot less... I had needed a lot more brain power to read it, which is what I'm saying. The next book I read this summer was Carrie Hope Fletcher's On the Other Side. I really wanted to read this because Carrie wrote it, not because of the subject matter of the book or the genre or anything like that. I am a really big fan of Carrie's. I think she's just a wonderful human being and I kind of love everything she does, so I really enjoy watching her YouTube channel. I haven't missed a video since I subscribed. I've seen her now in both her West End shows, so both Les Mis and I saw Chichi this summer. I just think she's a really inspirational, happy person. And so I really was intrigued when she brought out a fiction book, what it was going to be like. And I was really pleasantly surprised by her style. For her first book, she's got a really lovely narrative style to her. It's a really sort of sweet and lovely, warm book to read. It really reminds me, a lot of her personality comes through in this book, and I really did enjoy that. But all that aside, it isn't my genre of book. I'm not really a person that reads just a solely romance-orientated book, and that's definitely what this is. This is definitely a romantic love story. And so it's got some supernatural, paranormal elements, but not like there's loads of werewolves or vampires or anything like that. Don't want to give too much away, but it is kind of explained first of all. Basically, the protagonist is dead, and to get into heaven, she has to kind of reveal some secrets about herself to those still alive. It's basically the plot of the story, and so it has got like a supernatural element, but it's mainly just focused on the love story, which is a really sweet and lovely love story, and it's a really sweet book. And don't get me wrong, I did enjoy reading it, it's just not my genre of book. It's very much, I read it because of her. I just want to put that out there straight away, but I did still enjoy the book, and I think if you are into romance books, this is definitely one to pick up. It is definitely a young woman's romance book. A woman's romance book, to be honest. I think any woman, I don't think it's specifically a teen book, it's not, it's women's fiction or women's literature, whatever you want to call it. It's definitely in the romance genre, and I also think the cover is absolutely stunning. I pre-ordered but literally the minute that it was available to pre-order, I pre-ordered this book. The minute it arrived, I read it. It kind of shows you how excited I was for the book, and it didn't disappoint me. So that's a good thing for a book, really. But just look how, it's just, oh, it's so pretty. It's so pretty. Right. Then I read Every You, Every Me by David, I can never say this name, Levitan? I don't know how I'm saying it, I'm really sorry. I read this in one go in about half an hour. It took me no time at all. It is the quickest book I've ever read. Partly because the chapters are non-existent, I don't know if you can see, like they're very small. And also some chapters are just pictures. That's the thing that really drew me to this novel, really intrigued me, the use of pictures alongside narrative. But I was really disappointed. I didn't like really anything about this book. I thought the characters were very underdeveloped, the plot was not developed enough as well, and I don't think the pictures enhanced the reading or the storytelling element, which is a disappointment to me. I felt like they could have been used in a much more clever way. Basically, the plot of this book is a boy is finding envelopes who he believed to be from his friend, who we're not sure if she's dead, missing, has been institutionalised. It's not really put at the beginning, but we just know she's gone, and he keeps finding these envelopes with pictures in. But despite that the pictures are actually written into the plot, they're not, so you can kind of look at the picture that he's meant to be looking at. It doesn't actually add anything to the storytelling. I didn't need the picture there, and I think the pictures actually hindered it because the description was non-existent. It was very much a stream of consciousness. I didn't like the, at first let's see if I can find an example. At first I quite liked the scratching out. I thought it added quite an interesting thing, but then eventually it just got on my nerves. It really interrupted the flow of the book. I didn't enjoy having to reread things. I understand it was done for stream of consciousness, and it was done too much, and it just got irritating. There wasn't anything about this book that I can really say I favoured or enjoyed. I suppose the fact that it was quick, so I feel like I didn't really waste any time when reading it. So that was that book. I then read another book that I haven't actually got on me because I've lent it to my dad and he has not finished with it yet, so I don't have the cover. But it was called Plea of Insanity, which predominantly was about a lawyer going into her first murder trial, she was assisting, and the case was done where the defendant pled insanity as his defence. And so there was kind of like a battle and argument and an exploration of, is he pleading insanity just to get off of the horrific thing he's done, or is he actually insane and as such should be held responsible? It looked quite a lot into the ethical and moral nature of a plea of insanity, because obviously a lot of people do try to use it to get an easier ride on a horrific crime they've committed. But obviously if somebody is not within their right mind when they've committed a crime, should they be held accountable? So that was quite interesting. But I did have a bit of a problem with the book, in the sense of, I don't think it flowed very well. I think the author introduced a lot of themes and ideas into the book very late into the book, so they weren't explored in enough detail, and she threw in a lot of relationship stuff that I found quite boring and I thought hindered the plot of quite an exciting, more unethical debate. And also the murder itself was quite, the crime itself was quite gruesome, and I quite enjoy sort of gruesome crimes in literature. I don't know what that says about me, but I do. I think they're quite interesting. I like to, I find forensic psychology quite interesting, and looking into sort of the minds of psychopaths and things. And if the defendant was not seen as insane, he was definitely a psychopath, because the crime was horrendous, it was horrific. So it's just really interesting. I also think it would have worked really well as a TV series, and I would quite like to see it as a TV series. I don't know if it already is one or not. If it is, please someone let me know. But I would love to see it as a TV series, and then have a few more episodes to explore some of the later themes she was introducing. Like at one point she tried to throw in this idea of someone else, of another case that linked, but she just threw it in very absent-mindedly, and then it went again. That idea wasn't really explored in detail, and I would have loved to read more about that, is my point. So that was the next one I read, Plea of Insanity. I don't know the name of the author by heart, so I'm going to have to write it underneath. I'll put like a thing there. But it was a good book. It's worth a read. It's interesting. Next one I read, I finally got around to reading, was Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. This is a really well-known YA novel. I know so many people that talk about it have said I should read it, especially because I went through a very large portion of my life where I was writing fan fiction. And obviously now I am at university. I am in my last year, but I am still in university, so I do understand a lot. I'm in kind of the place where the protagonist is. I no longer really write fanfiction stuff, which is a shame. I wish I read this when I originally bought it in my first year, when I was still writing and reading fanfiction. I'm not really as involved in fandoms as I used to be anymore. I think purely just because I don't have the time, unfortunately. But I am still quite invested, so I can't be as invested as I was. But it's still a really, really lovely book. I do have a soft spot for YA novels of this genre, like contemporary YA novels. I do really enjoy reading them. They're kind of a guilty pleasure of mine. I don't, because they're not really exceptional, but they're also really nice, and I love the exploration of just adolescence. I think it's really interesting, and so it was a really good book. I liked the twin element. I haven't really read any books about twins, so that was quite interesting. I liked how fandom was explored. That was great. I really want to read the fan fiction that was in this book, and so I'm very happy that she's brought it out as another book, which I am now intending to buy and read, because I was just as invested in her fan fiction, and it kind of brought me back to when I used to read it and write it, and how time consuming and investing it is. You forget how much passion is in fandom, which is something I really love about fandom. I know that people really run it down, but it really made me just think about fanfiction writers and fandom and that exploration, and how passionate and creative it is, and how intense the emotions are, because by the end of it I really started to ship the ship that she ships. So it was great. Rainbow Rowell really captured what it is like to be in a fandom. She also really does the sort of twin struggle well, and the introverted nature of one twin, the extroverted nature of another, the struggle, the relationship she makes, the uni experience. It was slightly different from mine, because obviously this is an American college as opposed to an English university, but there was still parallels that I enjoyed. I just think this is a really good book, and I would definitely recommend it to anybody that is either going to university or college, or is in a fandom any way, shape or form, especially if the area of the fandom you're in is fan fiction, so you like reading and writing fan fiction, because I think it's a really it's really nice to read about it in literature and have it respected in literature and the differing opinions. I really enjoyed this book, so yeah, this was definitely worth a read. Then I read Harry Potter and the Cursed Child script. I pre-ordered this when I pre-ordered Carrie's book. I'm not going to go into detail about it because I've done a whole rant on my main channel, which I will also link below, but I hated it. Basically, that's all I'm going to say. I absolutely hated it. So that was that. Then I read the Blindness, which was my sister's suggestion. She really wanted me to read this. And it's the translation from the original Portuguese book. So I'm not going to be able to pronounce the names. I'm really sorry. I will write them below so you can read both the author and translator's name. But I don't want to butcher them. So it's not going to happen. But I watched this film with Mark Ruffalo and Julianne Moore in about 3-4 years ago, I think, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So me and my sister really loved it, and then I eventually bought this book for my sister because of how much she liked the film. She got round to reading it this summer, said it was fantastic, and insisted that I read it. So the minute I finished Harry Potter, I went straight onto it. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. It was a really interesting concept. Basically, the world goes under this epidemic of blindness. So blindness kind of becomes contagious, but instead of the blindness that we're used to, where it's complete darkness, it's really bright. There's this white bright light, and then for some reason unknown, one of our main protagonist, the Doctor's wife, because none of the characters are named in the book, which is also really interesting, doesn't go blind, but she pretends to go blind to help her husband so she doesn't get separated from him and that. And it's just a really interesting look into both how our eyesight really affects both our identity, our morality, because obviously, because no one can see you, people behave in such a different way, and names are no longer used as identifiers, because what's the point of knowing someone's name when you can't attach it to their face? It was a really interesting exploration, and it kind of shows how the human condition at both its worst and its best, and I just really enjoyed it as a book. I will say I didn't enjoy the flow as much. He doesn't really like to use punctuations. There's no speech marks at all, which makes it quite confusing at some points, because you don't know who's speaking, and half the way through I didn't realise someone was speaking until I caught on to the subject matter, if that makes sense. But it is still quite, I've lost my point. So the punctuation does affect it in the sense it makes it quite a hard read. It takes a while to really get into the flow of the book and pick up from where I left off, which was a shame. Because it is a really interesting topic, but I didn't like the way it was written in that sense. Though I did really enjoy the omniscient narrator and how he really did capture the feeling of blindness when reading this book. You really were blind, you were being led by the protagonist as well, because the omniscient narrator follows the Doctor's wife through it all. And he follows a bit of other characters, but mainly the Doctor's wife, but because no one can see, the description visually is very vague and everything's described for the other senses, and it's really interesting. It's a really fascinating book to read, both for the way it's written and the plot and the subject matter. So I do highly recommend it, but I do say it's quite a hard read. It does, there is literally hardly any punctuation at all, and so it really does make the flow difficult. Well, it did for me anyway. I don't know if it will for anyone else, but that's what I thought of that. And then I finally got round to reading the Spiderwick Chronicles series, which is something I have wanted to... these have been my TBR pile since I was about 10 years old. So, it's nearly 11 years I've had these and I haven't read them, 10.5 years. And I finally got round to reading them, and I really regret not reading them when I was younger, because they are fantastic books for children. This is a really good child series, and I do want to keep this so I can eventually read it to my kids one day, or make them read it or something, because I do think it's a really great series. It really captures magic night really in a really sort of lovely way, and the fantasy elements of the book are so well interwoven between reality that you kind of forget that it's not real. Even now, there was parts I forgot it wasn't real, and I think for a child it'd be really magical. I also really love the way it deals with divorce. When I was younger, there wasn't really many books about divorce, and when my parents got divorced, I kind of found there wasn't really any books that I could identify with, which is probably why I read a lot of Jacqueline Wilson, because hers were a lot about broken homes. But there weren't many magical books about broken homes. And so I kind of wish I read this when I was younger, because I really like the way it handles the divorce. It's not a major plot point, but it's within there, and I do really enjoy that. I also love the covers. I think they're fantastic. And the back with the leaves on and stuff, and then you've got the maps inside the book, and I do love a map inside a book. I'll just show you all the covers because they are just really beautiful. They are actually just really lovely books. The plots are all great for children. There's enough going on that it fills the book and continues nicely on to the next one, but there's not so much that it becomes complicated or too long for a child to read by themselves. So that I really enjoyed. They were scary enough that they bring some tension and some fear for a child, but it wasn't terrifying, it wasn't inappropriate. I also like the way the binding connects, by the way. And I also, what I really like as a nice touch, is there's a letter, I'll see if I can find it. There is a letter in here written from the protagonists to the authors, saying about how they've seen the fairies and creatures described. And that's what allegedly inspired these books. And I really liked that as a little touch within the books. So there's 5 of them. They basically took me no time to read, and I really am glad I read them. They're just really lovely books, but as I said, I regret not reading them as a child, and I think if I was younger, these would have been some of my favourite books, so it's a shame. And they were still very good. I could still appreciate them for what they were. And then the last book I read, literally finished this morning, is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. This was bought for me by a really good friend of mine. She basically had a copy that she loved, read part of it, didn't want to sort of put it aside for a bit, wanted to come back to it later, really thought I would like it, and then very generously bought me a copy of my own so I could read it, and she was right. I did really enjoy this book. It's the one that's most fresh in my mind, obviously because I finished it this morning, and it's a classic. Everybody know or has heard of Brave New World. And I was quite surprised because dystopian novels, especially classic dystopian novels, aren't hugely my thing. I haven't read that many of them, but the ones I've read and the really famous ones, especially 1984, which is a classic, I didn't enjoy. So I was slightly dubious about this, but I enjoyed this a lot more because of the elements it focused on. It really did focus on conditioning and psychology, which is obviously something I've got an interest in, having studied it now for coming up to 3 years at university, and then I did it also for A-level. And it also really focuses on reproduction, which is something that really fascinates me. I don't know what that says about me, but I love children, I love the idea of parenting and that relationship and dynamic. So there was something very intriguing about the elements that it looked upon. I also really liked the way it discussed it, because it rose some really interesting points. Because obviously at the beginning, you go in with this mind, or at least I did, of being very against the organisation of the world and the way it's been thrust on these people and how they've been conditioned into their roles and things, which obviously most people don't agree with, let's put it that way, and it's new and it's wrong. So I was very against it. But as the book progressed and they started to present their arguments, they actually became quite persuasive. I'm not saying I would have liked to live in the what would you call it, the world presented and created by Huxley, but I still think it was a very interesting argument and idea that for true happiness, choice can't be there. So choice and trust and art and science and development inhibit true happiness. And that way they're left in quite an infantile state, which you do, at some points I did quite look down upon them, but they're just behaving in such an infantile, irresponsible way. But then you realise that actually the time people are most happy is when they're infants, when you're behaving in an infantile way. The idea that they have towards sex, sometimes they feel quite uncomfortable, because there's a bit described as erotic play is encouraged among children. I don't know if he was getting at what my mind went to, but I found that quite uncomfortable as an idea. But I understand why he put it in and what it was used for. It basically wanted to kind of make sex more about the act and the pleasure it provides, as opposed to the emotional attachment it gives you to another person, and so kind of just condition people just to enjoy it with whoever, because it was kind of everyone belongs to everyone, which I don't think I'd be okay with, but maybe that's because I haven't been conditioned into it. I don't really know. It raised a lot of interesting questions in my head, and I'm still kind of digesting it. and pondering about this book and what it represents and presents as ideas. But I did really like the argument at the end of what's better to have, what would you rather have? True unconditional happiness. Well, I suppose it is conditional, but just you don't realise it is. Or people being unhappy but having the choice. Would you rather choose to be unhappy or be forced into happiness? I think is the argument this book is presenting. And it's quite an interesting thing, because at first of all you would think I want the choice to be unhappy, but then you think, actually, do I want to be unhappy? Would I rather just be blissfully ignorant in my own happiness? It's quite an interesting concept. I really, really enjoyed it. It's really making me think, and I like that when a book makes me think. So that was really interesting as a concept, and I'd quite like to read more books with that idea in mind. I think it's a very interesting subject matter. Yeah, it was really good. So I would also recommend this book, especially if you're into classics, because it is a classic. But also people that are into dystopians or just like a book that makes them think. I'd recommend this. So yeah, that's everything I read this summer. If anybody's read any of the books and has any of the opinions on them, please let me know. And again, any recommendations will be appreciated. I love hearing about new books I should be reading. But I understand I've read quite a weird collection of books this summer. I get quite bored. I don't really tend to stick to one genre. I don't go through a genre stage. I kind of read one book of one genre and then want to read a book of a completely different genre to try to balance it out a bit. So hopefully there'll be a book for everyone that I've kind of read. I will link all my Goodreads reviews below in a lot more detail from when I read them, apart from the Spiderwick ones, which I haven't really reviewed in detail because I didn't have much to say about them, being that they were quite short books, so I haven't actually done reviews on them. But all the other books I have done a Goodreads review on, I will link below. I hope everyone's had a really nice summer. I hope a lot of readings got done for people. And I'm looking forward to the new academic year, where hopefully I will finish my Goodreads reading challenge that I set myself at the beginning of the year. Though I don't know how that's going to happen, because I've read 24 books out of 50, and we are well over halfway in this year. So it's going to be interesting to try to finish that challenge. I might have to change it. I might have to bring it down slightly. Yeah. I hope I don't, though. I don't really like admitting defeat. Oh well. See you all again soon. Bye.